We are so lucky to have Barbara Harless here today with us. She's a good friend, a definite patriot. She fought a lot of the bills that were being going down in the Congress, in the state legislature this last time, and was sending us messages about what we were supposed to call our congressman on. She is a lover of the Constitution, which we all should be, but she is an activist lover of it, teaching it, knows it in and out, and knows why it's so important to stand up for it and protect it. So she's here tonight to give us some information about several things, one of them being the proposed amendments to the Texas Constitution. Everybody be ready to go vote next Tuesday the 5th.
What are we voting for?
That's what she's going to talk to us about. Okay, so Barbara, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Regina. Really appreciate it. I can talk for an hour and a half on this subject, so I'm going to do the best I can to give you the Cliff Notes version. You should have 3 handouts. 2 of them have to do with what I'm getting ready to talk about, the 9 proposed amendments to our state constitution, and then one of them is on a constitutional convention, which I will be going over at the end of my presentation. Okay, there it is right here. He's going to do it for me. We all know that we have a U.S. Constitution. It's really tiny. It fits right in your shirt pocket. It's a great rule book. We also have state constitutions. And our Texas Constitution is about 250 to 270 pages. And it is one of the longest constitutions in the United States. The state constitution that we're working off of right now was instituted or developed in 1876. And so we keep amending that every 2 years. Why do we amend it every 2 years? Well, there's certain things that are in the Constitution. And anytime you change the budget or you increase the taxes to the taxpayers, you have to amend our state constitution. So it's a good thing because it's put to the people. The bad thing is, recent history, only 4 to 6% of registered voters in Texas show up to approve or disapprove the amendments to our Constitution. So that means that 2 to 3% of the registered voters in Texas are telling you what you're going to do with your property taxes. So I didn't know that we amended our state constitution every 2 years until about 8 years ago or so, but we do. And so we amend it every time our legislature goes into session. We have a legislature that only goes into session every other year for 140 days. So we think that's good, but actually they are developing the bills that they are going to try to pass for the year before they go into session. So they get in there, and I'm going to show you some statistics that are going to blow your socks off. So I'm going to talk about the 9 proposed amendments to our Texas Constitution that the early voting is going on right now. Election day is Tuesday, November 5th. Early voting will last until Friday of this week. Is it Thursday or Friday? Friday of this week. And then they'll shut down the polls, and then you'll have to wait until Tuesday to go. And they should be open from 7 to 7 p.m. Now, before we discuss what is on the ballot, everyone needs to understand what the purpose and consequences of laws are. Every piece of legislation, I don't care if it's an ordinance at your city that says you can't have 8-foot tall pink fences. Every piece of legislation mandates the following actions unless the legislation specifically repeals and does not replace a previous law. The purpose of legislation is to restrict human activity, and its consequence is that it increases the size, scope, and operating cost of government through personnel to keep the records of the legislation of the violators, such as at the local level, that's clerks at your municipal, county, state, and federal. Each law or ordinance requires personnel to enforce the legislation through law enforcement, which will be your local police department, your county sheriff, your state police, your Department of Homeland Security, your EPA, your FDA, your ABCDEFG, all of those people. Personnel to penalize the violators of the legislation through the judicial department, which is your fine, court costs, imprisonment, or the worst part is loss of property via asset forfeiture. In Texas alone, we have 2,700 courts and 3,400 judges, not to mention all of the clerks and the staff to process the paperwork. Adding more legislation requires more clerks, law enforcement, and judicial staffing to penalize those pesky violators. Next slide, please, David. If one does not have time to read and research a proposed amendment, then one should vote no until they have a chance to understand all of the intended and unintended consequences. This should also be exercised by legislators, whether it's a city councilman or a state legislator. I have approached new candidates, I've approached incumbents, people that have been in office for a long time, and tried to explain this principle to them. If you don't understand what's in the piece of legislation, will you vote no? Because if it's a good piece of legislation, it will be brought up again if your no vote causes it to fail. And maybe at that time you'll have more time to research it and have, good confidence in what you're voting for. I have yet to have anybody say, yeah, Barbara, that's a great idea, I'll do that. So during the 83rd legislature, there were 6,142 bills. Now, these are action items. This was only just from January of this year through to the first part of August. They passed 1,443, or 24%, which is pretty much the running average for the past couple of sessions. Propositions to amend the state constitution do not take the form of a bill, they take the form of what they call a joint resolution. Well, they ended up proposing a total of 239 joint resolutions. They only passed 10 of them, or 4%. Remember, 10. You're only going to have 9 propositions on the ballot this week or next Tuesday. Why? Well, because one proposition has to do with water funding, because we're in a water crisis. I don't know if you knew that or not. And another one has to do with transportation funding. Transportation and water, they're both pretty basic necessities that I agree that the government should, appropriate for. Problem is, they don't appropriate for it until at the end of the session when they've already spent all the money on the Medicare and all the other things, the pet projects. So, next slide, please. I think there should be a rule, and I'm going to share with you what my rules are. Every ordinance and every law has to pass a 3-question test. And number 1 is it constitutional? What does that mean? Does it support our constitutional republic? Well, what does that mean? I gave you a little pamphlet that will explain it to you if you'll go home and read it. Basically, in my opinion, there are 3 things in a constitutional republic that are not up for negotiation. 51% of the people cannot vote to take away my right to life, liberty, and property. That's not negotiable. So if it has anything to do with that, to take away somebody else's right, 51% can take away the rights of 49%. Number 2, is there a need? Do all the people have a need for the government intervention? Because remember, every time you pass a law, you're increasing the size and the cost of the government. Money doesn't grow on trees in Texas yet like it does in Washington, D.C., where they just print it out of thin air. So we have a budget that we have to fit within. And the third question is it affordable? Can all the people afford it? Now, I will tell you that in the Texas Constitution, Article 8 is the topic of taxation and revenue. Section 1, item A says there shall be equality and uniformity in taxation. That's what it says. So I apply that rule to every piece of legislation if it has to do with taxing a certain group of people. Just remember that any time that you point some type of a mandate or restrictive action at a particular group of people, eventually you're going to be in that group. So don't do something to somebody else that you wouldn't want to have happen to you. Next slide, please. So we'll get right into it. There's 9 propositions. Prop 1 is the tax exemption for the spouse of an armed service member killed in action. I'm going to give you a little history and background on it. In 2007, the voters adopted an exemption from property taxes, all or part of the value of the residence homestead of a veteran certified as having a service-related disability of 100% or as totally disabled. In 2011, voters extended the exemption to the surviving spouse of a 100% or totally disabled veteran if the surviving spouse has not remarried and the property was the residence homestead of the surviving spouse when the disabled veteran died. This exemption amount transfers to future homesteads in an amount equal to the exemption on the initial homestead property. Prop 1 would extend this same property tax exemption to the surviving spouse of a member of the armed services of the United States who is killed in action, and that spouse must remain unmarried and can transfer the exemption to a future homestead. The enabling legislation that goes with Prop 1 is Senate Bill 163, and that amends the tax code to remove the minimum age of 65 years to qualify for this tax exemption. So you could have someone as young as 18 years old, or you could have someone, even older than that. So let's define killed in action. I didn't realize this until I looked it up. Do we have anybody in here that's a veteran? Yes, sir. All right. Well, tell me if I'm wrong. I just looked this information up. It's defined by the Department of Defense as one who need not have fired their weapons but have been killed due to hostile attack. Killed in actions do not come from incidents such as accidental vehicle crashes or other non-hostile events or terrorism. Killed in action denotes one to have been killed in action on the battlefield, whereas died of wounds, or DOW, relates to someone who survived to reach a medical treatment facility. Does that sound about? All right, next slide, please. Prop 1 deliberately would not require that the surviving spouse already have a homestead in Texas at the time of the service member's death. This would allow military families who rent or live in on-base housing to benefit from the exemption if they later became homeowners or live in on-base, later became homeowners. How is the property value limit appraised in this instance? In other words, if someone from California moved to Texas, where the housing there, the property values are inflated to Texas, are they bringing that value to base the property tax exemption on? And I asked the state comptroller's office, and they told me that the enabling legislation, Senate Bill 163, is silent on this matter. Therefore, the courts will decide. In other words, you have to pass the bill to find out what's in it. And this happens quite often. Legislators have a particular intent in the legislation that they pass, but it's not written properly, or we have too many laws, and they don't cover all the other areas that law is now affecting. I live in Collin County. The Collin County Appraisal District responded with, quote, "From what we interpret at this time, the surviving spouse would be entitled to the full appraised value of a property when they move to Texas from out of state. They would not be able to bring any documentation from another state to qualify, which is what they call transfer in. They essentially would need to qualify the new property in Texas as the base for the exemption. This may also necessitate an Attorney General opinion. One problem with the bill as written would be if the spouse did not let the county appraisal district know they had a previous homestead and wanted to qualify a new and higher valued property for the exemption. So as you can see, there's an unknown tax burden at this time if we have spouses of killed in action veterans. If the legislature continues to expand the category of property owners who receive property tax exemptions, local governments may have to raise property taxes on other property owners in order to generate the same amount of revenue. Next slide, please. Restrictions on Prop 1. The exemption would transfer in the amount equal to the exemption on the initial homestead property value at the time of death. The spouse must remain unmarried. The loss of exemption upon remarriage also could, for some people, provide an economic incentive against remarrying. Prop 1 would not impose a time limit on the property tax exemption. A surviving spouse in some cases could receive an exemption for several decades, costing local taxing authorities hundreds of thousands of dollars. The length of time and cost attached to this proposition make it challenging to predict. Next slide, please. So here we come to the 3 questions, and I would like for you to ask yourself these questions and answer them. And I would suggest to you, if all 3 questions don't get a pass, that you vote no on it, because we'll be lucky if 6% of the voters will show up. And I can guarantee you just about all of them will pass. And I can tell you that your no vote is not going to make it not pass. But I want some protest votes. because they always pass. And I want them to know down there in Austin, we're watching what you're doing. Okay? Because, and we'll go over the vote sheet. I gave you a vote sheet also. Most of these propositions passed without a single no vote. In the Senate, there was not one single no vote. Out of 31 Senate members, nobody voted no on any of these 9 propositions. There was 4 in the House that got some no votes. And what they will claim to you is, well, Regina, I wasn't so much for that. I just wanted to put it on the ballot so that you could decide whether or not you wanted it. BS. So they would put on the ballot to abolish the Second Amendment so I could decide. In my opinion, if they can't vote on their principles, yes or no, up or down, that is how I base whether I re-elect them or not. Do they represent my values? I follow their votes. I know what they're doing down there. And I'm with a group called the North Texas Citizens Lobby, and this is what we do. And we invite anybody to come along with us, and we'll show you what we're doing and show you how we do it, because we want more people watching. You don't have to agree with how they should vote with me. I just want you to watch them. We need to be involved. So on these questions, is it constitutional? Does it support the constitutional republic? I say it fails, because only survivors or veterans killed in action will be the direct beneficiaries. Is there a need? Do all the people have a need and benefit for the government intervention? I say it fails. There's not a need from all the people. And is it affordable? Taxation shall be equal and uniform. The burden on taxpayers is unknown. The cost is not equal and uniform, since spouses of veterans killed in action would be exempt from all or portions of ad valorem taxation for an unknown amount of time, and the only people to directly benefit. There's no sunset provision. There's no value threshold provision provided. The added tax burden on qualifying surviving spouses and their dependents from other states could add to the complexity and larger government in the county appraisal's office. Also, you have to realize that the county appraisal district is the gatekeeper for all property taxes. If you've never owned a home or something that you had to pay ad valorem or property taxes on, you may not understand what I'm saying, but your county appraisal district is the gatekeeper for keeping up with who gets an exemption. You know, they have to keep up with the municipal water district, your ISD, your city taxes, all of your taxes. They keep all of that. So when you add another layer of complexity to, okay, you know, Sarah gets an exemption because her spouse was killed in action. He has to continually, or she has to continually requalify you. Well, let's say you go out of state, let's say you go to Oklahoma and get married. You know, I mean, we have a lot of digital records now, but it still is an effort for somebody to go and pull that data and you know, check against it. So you're adding another clerk, you're adding more duties to somebody else. Like I say, every little ordinance, every little law, it requires some type of action for a clerk, you know, for the law enforcement, for the judicial system, every little one. If you don't mind, inch by inch by inch, we're making our government bigger. By George, vote for all of these. And I don't have anything against veterans. Please don't get me wrong. I mean, I support some veterans that I know, but I just think that that should be done at the local level. But that's my opinion. If you don't like my questions and my 3-question test, come up with your own. But be consistent. You know, whatever questions you come up with, use that on every piece of legislation. And contact your legislator, whether it's your city council or your county commissioner or your school board or Austin or DC, and find out how they voted and call them and say, why did you vote that way? I want to know why you voted that way. And the question came up about Sessions, Pete Sessions. I went to a activist training seminar, and something was said to me that I thought was very profound and true. Having access to a legislator does not necessarily make them listen to you. What makes them listen to you is if they don't know if they've got your vote next time. You know, if you always vote D or you always vote R or, you know, whatever it is, and they know they've got your vote, they're not going to give you the time of day as far as listening to what you have to say. But if you're an independent voter, or they know that you're not, they don't have your vote zipped up and in the bag, they're going to listen to what your gripes are. So just keep that in mind. Don't let them think that you're going to vote for them no matter what. Always let them think that you've got something between your ears. You don't really know who you're going to vote for next time. So, next slide, please. Prop 2. I need to move a little bit faster. This is pretty much just a housekeeping proposition. This is the only one that I know I'm going to vote yes on. It's the removal of the State Medical Education Board. This board hasn't made any loans since 1988, I believe. It was changed, and the Attorney General said that it was unconstitutional, so they moved all of the authority from the Education Board, State Medical Education Fund, and the State Rural Medical Education Board over to another body. Next slide. No loans have been issued since 1988. The Sunset Commission had recommended that this be abolished. So this is really just a housekeeping thing to take it out of the Constitution because the body doesn't operate anymore. Next slide, please. Is it constitutional? Well, assuming that all the information that they're putting out down in Austin, as there not being any outstanding loans and it's defunct and whatnot, yes, it is. Is there a need? Assuming the information that they're giving is correct, yes, there is. And is it affordable? Assuming the information that they're giving out, yes, it is. Okay, next slide. Prop 3. This is another one that has to do with your property taxes. Allowing the extension of exemption from inventory taxes. This only has to do with aircraft parts. Texas is one of a small number of states that assesses a property tax on inventory, business inventory. Both the Texas Constitution and the state statutes exempt from ad valorem taxation free port property that is located in the state temporarily for 175 days. Under the state Constitution, to qualify for the exemption from inventory taxes, such good, wares, merchandise, and other tangible personal property must have been acquired in or imported into Texas, detained for assembly, storage, manufacturing, processing, or fabrication, and shipped out of Texas no later than 175 days after acquisition or importation. Freeport goods currently qualify if they leave Texas within this 175 days. In other words, they're not taxed. Prop 3 proposes to extend the tax exemption timetable from 175 days to 2 years or 730 days. Next slide. This measure, if adopted on November 5th, would be applied entirely at the discretion of the local taxing districts. That means Prop 1 that we went to is mandatory. If we pass that on November 5th, all taxing districts must extend that to a spouse of a killed in action military service member. Prop 3 is at the discretion of the local taxing entity. So if we pass Prop 3, your school board, your city, your municipal water district, your county college district, all your different taxing districts are at liberty to extend this to an aircraft part manufacturer if there's one in your town or in your taxing district. Once they extend that tax exemption, it cannot be rescinded. So once it's extended, that's forever. So again, next slide, please. Taxable value of the parts that would become subject to the exemption cannot be predicted. I called my own county tax assessor and I said, how many aircraft part manufacturers are there in Collin County? How many are there in Murphy? Well, there's nowhere that I could go to get that information. This was actually passed, the author of this proposition and the enabling legislation was Linda Harper Brown, who represents Irving, and Aviall, which does aircraft parts, is thinking of expanding, and so she wrote this bill specifically for Aviall. So it has to go on the Constitution. But if you happen to have any aircraft parts or they move into your taxing district, you could be, burdened with additional taxes. Next slide, please. So here we are at the test. Is it constitutional? I say it fails because this tax exemption only benefits industries that inventory airplane parts, thus singles out one group for tax preference. Each taxing entity may or may not allow the voters to vote on acceptance, as this is left up to each taxing district. I also called to find out, okay, so would my city council have to put it on the ballot before me? Would my school district have to put it on the ballot before me? It depends upon each taxing district's procedures that they already have in place. Some could, some, or some could just make it a board decision. We're going to extend it, and we don't care what Regina has to say about it. So again, it's an unknown. Where was I? Okay, question 2, is there a need? Do all the people have a need and benefit for the proposed government intervention? I say it fails. All people in all the industries do not demonstrate a need and will not receive direct benefits. Each taxing entity may or may not allow the voters to vote on acceptance, and this is left up to each district's procedures. Is it affordable? Can all the people afford it? Prop 3 would allow, it fails, would allow a political subdivision to extend, I can't talk, Freeport, this is not a good night not to be able to talk, to extend a Freeport exemption for a specific group selling goods for certain purposes, singling out one group for tax exemption, even for a meritorious purpose, raises issues of uniformity in taxation. If the extension were authorized for aircraft parts, similar industries that make specialized parts and accumulate a great deal of idle inventory would be justified in seeking a similar extension, thus putting more of a burden on those who are still paying the property taxes. Next slide, please. So Prop 4 is another tax exemption for disabled veterans whose homesteads were donated by a charity. Again, you have the same history. In 2007, voters approved a property tax exemption for the 100% disabled veterans. In 2011, they extended it to the surviving spouse. Next slide. Prop 4, if approved, would allow for a homestead exemption from property taxes equal to the veteran's degree of disability if the resident's homestead was donated to the disabled veteran by a charitable organization at no cost to the veteran. This proposed tax exemption transfers to the surviving spouse if the veteran dies after qualifying for the new exemption and the property remains the resident homestead of the surviving spouse who has not remarried. Concerns that property owners who receive property tax exemptions will force local governments to raise property taxes on other property owners in order to maintain the same revenue stream. If the purpose of this proposition is to help disabled veterans, it should have a sunset provision, value threshold, or similar mechanism so that families who eventually adjusted and could afford to pay property taxes did so. Next slide, please. The House Research Organization report makes this statement: limitations and restrictions on certain other property tax exemptions for disabled veterans do not apply to the new exemption. I don't understand what this means. I made several phone calls on it, and I couldn't really get a good clarification that I could repeat to you. So I'm not sure what that means, but it looks like to me that if, that it's something that would come into play. Next slide. Is it constitutional? I'm neutral on this one. Only disabled veterans and surviving spouses who receive a 100% donated homestead, like from Habitat for Humanity, that type of a charitable organization. Is there a need? No, not from everybody. And it fails the affordability because it puts an unknown burden on the remaining taxpayers. This is how we get started. Let's say that there was no tax exemption for any veterans or their surviving spouses or anything. A one-time thing, everybody could feel good about that. But as you can see through the history, they keep chipping away. They keep, extending the tax exemptions to more and more people. So if you can tell me exactly when that will stop, then I might vote for this, but it just continually erodes on the backs of those who work, who can't afford it. Eventually, they're not going to be able to afford it if we keep doing this. Next slide, please. Now we're moving on to Prop 5, which is a reverse mortgage loan for the purchase of a homestead. Who in here knows anything about reverse mortgages? You do? Oh, do you really? Okay, well, you might be able to help me with some of this. And you do too? A little bit?
That's not my area.
Well, all I know is what... Yeah. Well, all I know is what Fred Thompson tells me when I'm at home eating lunch and I turn on the TV. So I had to do some research on this. A reverse mortgage is a loan advanced on the basis of equity in the borrower's homestead, which is the difference between a home's market value and what is owed on the home. The minimum age of borrower is set at 62 years. Next slide, please, David. Generally speaking, it's a credit agreement under which a creditor provides money to a borrower in exchange for a lien on the borrower's home, and the borrower is generally not required to repay the money or interest on the money until the borrower dies, sells the home, permanently moves out of the home, or violates conditions of the contract, which can be very numerous because every lender puts something different in their provisions, is what I understand. Really? Yeah. Yeah. Next slide, please. So, very quickly, the history of reverse mortgages in Texas. In 1997, Texas voters adopted a constitutional amendment that allowed new types of loans that could be secured using a homestead as collateral and allowed the proceeds of those loans to be used for any purpose. One type of loan authorized by that constitutional amendment was a reverse mortgage. When advances on a reverse mortgage were first authorized by the voters, the state constitution required that those advances to be made in the form of a single lump sum payment or in multiple payments of equal amounts at regular intervals. Next slide. In 1999, the voters approved a constitutional amendment conforming state law on reverse mortgages to federal law and allowed a borrower to request that one or more of the regular advances be reduced in amount. In 2003, the Constitution was further amended to allow a borrower to convert an existing home equity loan into a reverse mortgage. And in 2005, again, the Constitution was amended to allow a borrower to receive advances on a reverse mortgage in the form of a line of credit only at times and in the amounts requested by the borrower. The 2005 Constitutional Amendment also prohibited borrowers from obtaining an advance on a reverse mortgage by using a credit card, debit card, or similar device to discourage the use of line of credit advances or other advances for frivolous purposes or in response to enticement. Next slide, please. In 2009, the federal government created the home equity conversion mortgage for purchase, and it became available as an option under the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. The HUD program administers the home equity conversion mortgage program. Home equity conversion mortgages for purchase are not offered in Texas because under current state law, borrowers are not permitted to use equity accumulated in their existing home and a reverse mortgage to finance the purchase of a new home. Prop 5 would allow Texas seniors to combine these two steps into a single transaction, thereby saving money on closing costs and allowing them to move into a new home without a mortgage payment. I don't understand how all of this works. You'd have to sign the papers to find out. Okay, all right. Next slide, please. Prop 5, it does sound good, though. It requires a written notice to be provided by lenders to borrowers of a reverse mortgage describing actions or inactions of the borrower that could result in a possible foreclosure of the reverse mortgage. The notice must be provided at least 12 days before the closing rather than at closing. Well, that's good. If anybody's ever closed on a piece of property, you end up with a stack of papers like this that you have to sign, and they just keep throwing them at you. And they say, here, sign this, sign this. We'll give you a copy, but you can't read it until you take it home, you know. Next slide, please. Foreclosure by lender may occur if the borrower fails to pay taxes and insurance, occupy the property, maintain the property, or settle any secondary liens on the property. So if you paint your house, and let's say the painter runs off and he doesn't finish painting the south side, and so you haven't paid him the last 20%, he can put a workman's lien on your house. You have to settle with him, or the lender can come in and take your property away from you. Next slide. Payment of principal and interest on the reverse loan is due when all borrowers have died, the homestead property securing the loan is sold or otherwise transferred, all borrowers cease occupying the homestead property for a period of longer than 12 consecutive months and without prior written approval from the lender, or the borrower, and there's a laundry list of items that are in the Texas Constitution. Next slide. The Texas Legislative Council report states the disclosure regarding property taxes would be an important consideration for seniors who currently are eligible to defer unpaid property taxes in Texas. in order to remain in their homes, but may lose that opportunity when using a reverse mortgage. Again, I inquired on this and I couldn't get a direct response. You might want to do that and get a good response yourself. Do you have any idea what that statement means?
Well, I'm not a captain to know about the property tax stuff.
Okay. All right. Next slide, please. So reverse mortgages are confusing. The Texas Constitution states, although payment of principal or interest shall not be required under reverse mortgage until the entire loan becomes due and payable, interest may accrue and be compounded during the term of the loan as provided by the reverse mortgage agreement. I just hate paying interest on interest. You know, it's compounded. So, next slide. Is it constitutional? I say that it passes because property owners are free to dispense with their property in the manner that they deem most beneficial to them. However, the details of actual closing papers is not known at the date of this posting. This is from an article I wrote. There is concern that elderly people and property owners may be remiss in protecting their best interests. Is there a need? Does everybody, I'm neutral on that, only 62 years of age and older, will this apply to? Can seniors afford it? Again, this cannot be answered. It can't be predicted, so I don't know. Yes, sir?
On that other proposal that you asked, do you understand it?
Which one?
Concerning the taxes taken out against the equity in the houses or the property and the reverse mortgage being put on it. Those two would be competing for the equity in that home. And so I can see how the state would not want that competition because they may end up not getting everything that they're due.
Okay.
So that would be the problem with it.
That would be the problem there? Okay.
Yeah, because the
All right.
two would not be coordinating with each other.
All right. I understand what you're saying. Okay. Then we'll move on to Prop 6. Next slide, please. This is the one that you've probably heard about on the radio and the TV. Prop 6. Creating funds to assist in the financing of priority projects in the state for the water plan. This is the development of a long-term, affordable, and sustainable method to provide financing assistance to implement water supply projects. This year, the 83rd legislature in Austin, they spent $106 billion, or 26% more than the previous session. Prop 6, which was passed at the end, again, you have to have water. This should have been a priority. This should have been set in the budget before they did anything else. Prop 6 further proposes to take $2 billion from the Economic Stabilization Fund, or what is often called the Rainy Day Fund. It's our savings account. And to use it to supplement the financing of water projects. This is an ongoing expense. In speaking with Representative Van Taylor, which he's considered to be the water guru up here in the North Texas area, I talked to him a couple, as a matter of fact, I saw him tonight. He stated that there are more than a dozen funding mechanisms currently in place for financing water projects that are attainable by most communities in the state of Texas. In my opinion, rating the Texas Savings Account for an ongoing expenditure is unreasonable at best and fiscal dereliction of duty at worst. And as I told you in the beginning, this addresses the water funding. There was a 10th joint resolution that was passed that's not on this year's ballot, but it's going to be on next November's ballot all by itself. Unless they go into special session, that will be the only proposed constitutional amendment. The one that's going to be in on 2014 has to do with transportation funding. This has to do with water funding. The water people worked out a deal with the transportation people, and they said, we'll pass this bill in both of the chambers, the House and the Senate down in Austin, but you have to put it on the 2014 ballot because it raids the rainy day fund also. So, you know, Texans are slow, but we're not that slow. So if you see two items on the same ballot raiding the savings account, somebody might put, you know, the water people didn't want theirs not to pass because the transportation people got theirs to pass, vice versa. I don't know what all the negotiations were in the back room. So that's how come the transportation is going to be on next November's ballot. Remember that when you go to vote for congressmen and everybody else. vote no. Next slide. Is it constitutional? I say it fails. The voters do not understand the funding mechanisms for water, nor that, $6 billion, we approved $6 billion additional dollars for water funding back in 2011. If you didn't know that we were amending our Constitution and we were spending more money, you didn't know that. That $6 billion that was set aside has barely been tapped. I think Van said maybe $500 to $600 million of it. We're talking $6 billion that hasn't been tapped. According to Van, we don't have a funding problem in Texas. What we have is a permitting problem. It takes anywhere from 5 to 10 years to get all the permits that you need to either build a reservoir or, some of the underground,
Aquifer.
Yeah.
And the fracking companies have no problem getting their permits to destroy that.
Well, and here's the thing. God creates the water, okay? So if you need more water in Dallas and Fort Worth, we're going to have to take it from somebody else, right? And I have talked to ranchers over the past year to year and a half, and now I understand since Prop 6 came up, because they're having a hard time feeding their livestock and growing their agriculture, because a lot of their underground water supplies are being depleted for the larger population in the urban areas. So, there's only so much water. Somebody's going to suffer. And of course, our farmers are having a hard enough time, with the big Monsanto and everybody else coming in and, taking over the little farmer. So I hope that if you don't vote no on anything else, vote no on Prop 6. And just as a protest vote. It's going to pass because there's too many people that don't read the bills, they don't know what's in it, and all they do is they watch TV and they listen to the radio. Next slide, please. Moving on to Prop 7. It applies to home rule city municipalities. You have general law cities and you have home rule cities. Home rule cities, if you don't know does anybody not know what a home rule city is? Okay. You have to have a population of 5,000 or more, and then the voters have to vote to adopt a city charter. Otherwise, if you're just a general law city, the state of Texas tells you everything that you can and cannot do in your town. If you vote to adopt a city charter, there are certain things that you get to decide, like how many city council members are going to be. What are their terms going to be? Are they going to be 2, 3, or 4-year terms? Is it a council manager form of government, or I forget what the other one is. But anyway, there's certain things that you can vote on at the ballot box. Everybody goes and says, this is, what we want. So this only affects home rule cities. Dallas is one. My little town of Murphy is one. Most towns that have 10,000 or more in population have a city charter. The way the law used to be is if your terms were 2 years, you just had 2-year terms. Most people don't put 1-year term, but if you had 2-year terms on your city council, your elected officials, you could decide if there was a vacancy that was like 13 months or longer, like say somebody died or somebody resigned or somebody moved, and the term still had more than 12 months in it. In the city charter, they could decide if it was going to go to a special election to fill that last 13 months, or if the sitting city council was going to appoint a successor until that term was up. If you had 3- and 4-year terms, the state, you had to hold a special election anytime there was a vacancy in your any of the city council. What this does is it says that if your city charter doesn't already state how the vacancies are going to be handled, and you have 3- and 4-year term limits, then you can change it. In other words, the same rules that were applied to the 2-year term limits now also apply to the 3- and 4-year term limits. So that's basically what this is saying. Next slide, please. Current law, prohibits the appointment. Go to the next one. Go to the next one. The pros of appointment versus a special election. You avoid expensive special elections, thus cutting taxpayer costs. The candidates' costs are cut. Special election and regular election campaigns cost them money. Or the pros of the special election versus an appointment by the sitting council. Special elections are a small price to pay to ensure accountability, and there's less chance of cronyism when you have your special elections. You know, I think that the flexibility should be left up at the local level. You know, the upside to that is you allow your local citizens to decide, well, do we want the city council to appoint, or do we want a special election? The problem is most people don't go to their city council meetings, much less even know who's even on their city council. So that's the problem that we have. Next slide, please. Is it constitutional? I say it passes. Citizen participation in and control over governments is strongest at the local level. Removing the state restriction on how certain municipalities fill vacancies on their governing body favors local control over state control. Is there a need? I'm neutral on that. Is it affordable? I say it passes. Yes, special elections are expensive, but we're the taxpayers. We're the ones that are paying for those government services. We're the ones that are paying all of our services. We should have an opportunity to have a voice at the ballot box to say what we want and what we don't want and how we want to be taxed. So that's what I say. Proposition 8, next slide. To repeal the tax limit on Hidalgo Hospital District. Hidalgo County is located in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas on the Rio Grande River. It's right across the river from Reynosa, Mexico. Brief history, in 1967, there was a state constitutional amendment to create a special hospital district in certain counties, including one in Hidalgo County, with a maximum tax rate of 10 cents per $100 valuation of taxable property value. In 1962, the voters approved the creation of hospital districts composed of one or more counties, or all or any part of one or more counties, at a maximum tax rate of 75 cents. Next slide. Prop 8 would repeal Article 9, Section 7 of the Texas Constitution, which limits Hidalgo County to a maximum tax rate of 10 cents per $100. Next slide. Let me tell you about Hidalgo County, and I hate this. Why should I, in Collin County, be asked to vote on something that has to do with the people down on the Rio Grande River? But it's in the Constitution. And so I'm being asked, you know, to put my stamp of approval on it or not, okay? Hidalgo is the largest county in Texas and one of the largest counties in the nation without a local hospital district. This is a hospital district is basically like Parkland Hospital. It services through the property taxes the indigent care system, the people that don't have hospitalization or they've fallen on bad luck or whatever that is. And it's the only one in the state, Hidalgo County is the only one in the state with a maximum tax rate of 10 cents per $100 valuation for a hospital district. It also has one of the lowest tax bases per capita, meaning that you know, there's not that many people making that much money that are paying property taxes, which makes it difficult to raise sufficient money at the 10-cent maximum tax rate. It's on the Rio Grande Valley. It's one of the fastest growing counties in the United States. The 2010 census was 775,000. It's the 8th most populous county in Texas. It includes the city of McAllen across the Rio Grande from the Mexican city of Reynosa. Brownsville, Texas, and Matamoros are 1 hour to the southeast. Next slide. So Prop 8 was created by two identical joint resolutions. One originated in the House by Representative Guerrera of Hidalgo County, and one was in the Senate by Senator Hinojosa of Hidalgo County. Next slide, please. The enabling legislation behind Prop 8 is House Bill 3793 by Coleman. He represents a part of Houston. The bill makes numerous changes in the powers, duties, and services of entities serving counties and including provisions for Hidalgo County commissioners, and votes to create a hospital district with a maximum tax rate of 75 cents. This bill has already passed and took effect September 1st. I asked them, I said, well, what if we don't pass Prop, 8? And, you know, we always do, okay? But what if we don't this time? You know, you've already passed this other House bill and it went into effect September 1st. they just basically said, well, it'll pass, you know, this is just repealing a certain section of the Constitution that only applies to Hidalgo County, and it should pass. This is what they're doing to us down in Austin. We're not paying attention. So they get a few people to show up and vote for it, and we don't show up and protest. Like I say, if you don't know what's in the bill, just vote no. Vote no, because if it doesn't pass and it's a good bill, they'll bring it up again, and maybe you'll have more time to research it until you do like it. Okay, next slide. I pretty much, I'm not going to go over this. Go to the next one. Next one. Oh, go back. Okay, the enabling legislation, House Bill 3793. I went and looked at it. Okay, Hidalgo County, it states, Hidalgo County Commissioners Court shall order an election for the registered voters of Hidalgo County on the question of creation of the Hidalgo County Hospital District if the Commissioners Court receives a petition requesting an election that is signed by at least 50 registered voters. 770,000 people in Hidalgo County, 50 registered voters can put it on the ballot. Next slide. But would allow Hidalgo County with voter approval to create a district capable of serving. Next slide is what I wanted to do it. Oh, maybe I missed it. Okay, but it takes 15% of the voters to dissolve the hospital district, 15% of 770,000 versus 50 voters to tax. Now you have to realize that we probably have a lot of indigent, well we do, I mean the statistics for Hidalgo County are there. A lot of indigent people, probably a lot of people that came over the river from Mexico. So, you know, so they want to put a 75-cent tax on the property owners so that they can develop a hospital district. They do have private hospitals down there. They have more than one. So I know that, you know, the necessity is not totally there. Anyway, I had a hard time with those lopsided petition figures. So the question is, does it, Prop 9. Oh, is it constitutional? The state has the power to allow local voters to create county hospital districts with funding provided through ad valorem taxes or taxes on your property. Is there a need? Do all the people have a need? I say it fails. Currently, there are functioning hospitals down in Hidalgo County, which indicates that there's not unanimous need for a taxpayer-funded hospital. Is it affordable? Specifically, the property owners. I say it fails. So, next slide. Now, Proposition 9. This one is real hard. I had to have David Evans, who is the judge, we just elected him last year, for the 5th District. He's in the appeals court. He came to our group and he made an explanation. He thinks that Proposition 9 is good. I'm going to stick with my standards of if I don't understand all the intended and unintended consequences, I'm voting no on it. But all I could get out of it is that it expands the State Commission on Judicial Conduct's sanctioning authority, allowing the expansion of the ability of the State Commission on Judicial Conduct to consider more alternatives in remedy to a complaint will allow an ability to consider lesser as well as greater charges and transparency in the judicial review process. David did a real good job of explaining, but you know, thank goodness I've never been tried in a court. I've never had to learn how all of that works. And lawyers are my least favorite people anyway. I mean, my favorite nephew became a lawyer. And, you know, the Thanksgiving dinner table talk just isn't the same. Everything is calculated. Everything is just, I don't know, I know that we need some of them, but I don't think we need a lot of them. You're not a lawyer, are you? You're looking at me really funny.
He is actually a lawyer.
He is?
But I'm not judging what he's
Okay, okay.
I've come across a number of very corrupt people at all levels in that institution.
Really? Yeah.
In the city government, every level of government attracts the filthiest minds in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
Greediest, most lusting for power.
Well, David Evans makes Judge Evans makes a presentation on this. If you contact me, I'll give you my email address and tell me that you want the video clip of him explaining. He spent 10 minutes and he did a very good job. So I would just defer to that.
If you send it to Regina, she can send it out to a lot of us.
Okay, I will. I'll send you the link and how many minutes at the end where he is, so you don't have to listen to this presentation that you've already had to suffer through.
By the title, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I've talked to a lawyer. There was only one House representative that voted no on that, and that was Representative Larry Phillips. He represents Grayson County up on the river. And I called him and I said, you were the lone dissenting vote on this. Why? I want to know why. You know, I was just trying to get some information on it so I could form an opinion. Well, he's a lawyer. He's a practicing attorney. And he said that he based it basically on the fact that we elect our judges, so that should be the way that we get rid of them. Well, unless you're in somebody's courtroom, you really don't know how, or if you follow, you know, cases, which I don't follow cases. I don't even read the Dallas Morning News anymore. So how am I going to even know that, you know, some judge is doing something, because I don't read that kind of news. So I don't know. Everybody's different. So
That's
yes,
kind
sir.
of like saying parents give birth to their children, so should they be the ones to punish them for crimes?
Punish the children for crimes
Well, I mean, if they commit a murder or something.
if they're underage.
Well, I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
I think there should be an oversight committee.
Well, there is. Yes, but what Prop 9 does is it seeks to expand the
Oversight.
reprimand. In other words, if they've received a complaint, Judge Evans was saying that instead of only being able to consider the greater charges, they can also consider the lesser penalties or charges on it. So,
Well, if they bring a charge in that's too great, they have to let that go. And that may be the way to avoid the charge they're guilty of.
okay,
And if they've got buddies up there, that's exactly what they're gonna do.
okay, all right.
Speaking of buddies up there, some years ago, we were in a meeting, I guess it was sponsored by the state Supreme Court. And there were judges arriving by the busload to object to some new legislation. I can't even remember what it was at the time. But they were all Masons. And the Grand Master of Freemasons in Texas is a judge. And we had, I don't know, 35 to 50 judges in there, and they were all Masons and B'nai B'rith and everything. And I mean, it's just like, you're like, okay.
Special interest group.
Do we have
That
a,
is a special interest group,
Yeah.
yes.
so do we have a problem here? It sounds to me like a problem.
Yeah, I was just reading an article today about a judge getting caught texting stuff to the prosecutor. There was a lot of stuff.
Yeah, well,
Is Evans for it or against?
Evans is for this,
For it.
yeah.
Why
And
are you against it?
because I don't understand it.
Oh, okay, so it's one of those no. and-
That's
okay.
my
Yeah, if
take
it's
on
good,
it.
It'll come back up again.
Yeah, and until somebody can explain it to me thoroughly so I do understand it. David did a good job, but I just don't understand. He assumes in his conversation that I understand the whole process, and I don't. You're going to have to take me from kindergarten up to 12th grade, you know, in a conversation.
Is
So-
there more text to that proposition?
Yes, there is. Yeah, that's just my short version of it. It actually reads, let me see if I have it. What it will say on the ballot is the proposed amendment expands the sanctions available for assessment by the commission. This is a Judicial Conduct Commission, or the State Commission on Judicial Conduct. It expands the sanctions available for assessment by the commission following a formal proceeding by authorizing the commission to issue an order of public admonition, warning, reprimand, or requirement that the judge or justice obtain additional training or education in addition to the currently authorized punitive sanctions. The proposed amendment applies only to a formal proceeding instituted by the commission on or after January 1st of 2014. Does that make sense to you?
Sounds like to me that it's giving a pathway for judges who are misbehaving to be just basically sent for continuing legal education and get out of it.
It's a possibility. But yes, it is. It's where there's been a complaint on a judge. And
So
it's-
you send him to a class and that's gonna change his moral behavior?
Well, it depends.
It may not have
It
been moral,
depends.
it may have been lack of understanding because of lack of training in that
Okay.
area, because these people are elected.
Okay,
Right,
good point.
I mean, it's
Right.
possible.
right, right.
The biggest problem we have in the United States is the law, the rule and regulation. Nobody can comprehend them. There is 2.5 million laws. Most of them is out of date and still on the book. Maybe we can come up with a proposition and limit it to the book that you have in your pocket. That would be it.
That's right,
You know,
yes.
This is ridiculous.
Because ignorance of the law is no excuse. I
Yes.
know, I understand.
No, I tell that to the judges. I say, do you know how many books, how many laws in the book, and on the books? He don't know. I say, do you know how many rights do we have? He don't know. We have 1,100 rights and 2.5 million
Yeah.
laws.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
is no mind in the world that can comprehend that.
Exactly.
Memorize
We have too many lawyers writing too many laws, I agree.
that. And they don't know the law either.
Next slide, please, David.
They
So
know procedures.
I'm going to run on through the Constitutional Convention because it's already 9:15, I'm 30 minutes over. David Levin wrote a book, and if it were 5 years earlier, I'd be jumping all over it. But I've been studying the Constitution and I realized there are rules. We already have rules in place that will keep Congress from doing what it's doing. The problem is not in the rules, the problem is with the people who are responsible for enforcing them. And that's
Absolutely.
everybody in this room.
Absolutely.
So adding another amendment is not going to make them start following the first 10 that they violate every time they get together. So they ignore the first 10 every day. Did you also know, and this is something that most people do not realize, but there are 27 amendments to our current U.S. Constitution. Only one of them actually went to the voters, people in this room. All 26 of the others were adopted by the state legislatures. And the one that went to the people was the 21st Amendment, which repealed the 18th Amendment, which was prohibition. Okay? So, we don't know what will happen in a constitutional convention because the last one that we had was in 1787. And they were supposed to, that was the 13 colonies coming together, and they were supposed to come together to amend the Articles of Confederation, which was the national document at that time. And they also had rules that in order to amend the Articles of Confederation, all 13 colonies, 100%, had to agree and ratify. Otherwise, the amendment didn't fly. Well, what did the founders do? They met in Philadelphia, they threw the press out, they met in secrecy, they completely rewrote the Articles of Confederation, and they changed the ratification rules from 100% of the colonies to only 3/4. All they needed was 9 of 13, okay? So that is the history of what we have for a constitutional convention. David Levin says, this isn't a con, this is a what does he call it? Convention of States. If you read Article 5, it tells you 2 ways that you can amend our current Constitution. The way that we've always done it, and that is where Congress sends the proposal down to all of the states, and the legislatures vote on it up or down, and 3/4 of the states have to vote to ratify it for it to become part of our U.S. Constitution. The other way is through a constitutional convention, convention of states. You can call it whatever animal you want it to. We haven't done it since 1787. So, there are no rules. The rules are not written in the Constitution that we have right now. We can only go on what has happened before. If we have our elected leaders that we have in Texas right now, they're going to vote to a balanced budget amendment, you know, term limits, whatever all these things are that he proposes that sound great. The House of Representatives has 150 members down in Austin. The Senate has 31. The Speaker of the House is President of the House. The Lieutenant Governor is President of the Senate. We have a Governor, and we have a Texas Attorney General. If we don't have, go to the next slide. I think this is what I was going to say. Yeah. If Texas doesn't have a state legislature that is going to pass legislation to exercise the 9th and 10th Amendments to push back against a tyrannical D.C., which they did not do
Yeah. They did
last
not.
session, all of the good Second Amendment bills, all of the anti-Obamacare bills, they all died in committee. And those committees are run by the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the lieutenant governor. They basically pick the committee chairs and make sure that the stuff that they don't want to come out of committee for a full floor vote, they don't come out of committee. So if we have people down in Austin that can't even stand up on the 10th Amendment, do you think they're going to get together in a convention of states with 49 other state legislatures where their voice is diluted? They're suddenly going to grow a spine and they're going to start doing what you want them to do? And you also have a governor that won't sign strong 10th Amendment bills. Whenever I was down there and I'd talk to him, I'd say, well, how do I get this bill out of committee? Well, you get a variety of excuses. The committee chair would blame it on the Speaker of the House or the Lieutenant Governor. Lieutenant Governor and Speaker of the House would blame it on, say, well, if I get that bill out of committee, the governor's going to veto it or he won't sign it. Or if you ask the governor would say, well, the Attorney General won't go, we're going to get sued over it. And the Attorney General won't go to bat for it because he said it won't stand up in the Supreme Court. So if you've got all these guys blaming each other, you think they're going to grow a spine when it comes to a ratification, or a constitutional convention? Next slide, please. Who will enforce a new amendment? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I just can't see a convention of tyrants coming out and becoming pure angels. I just don't see it happen that way. Next slide. Electing the right people. I used to think that was the answer, showing up at the ballot box, because most people don't. So I really felt like I was doing the American thing and I was doing my part. That's only half of it. You have to start watching over their votes. That is the other half. If you don't have both of those, we lose our rights. Was it Michael Badnarik said, rights, are like your teeth. Only floss the ones that you care to keep. Well, so rights are the same way. Only fight to protect the rights that you want. Sell the others to the highest bidder. NTCL.org is the group that I went down to Austin with every single week during the past session. I learned a whole lot. We bring others along with us. We teach them what we've learned. We have standing with a lot of legislators. As a matter of fact, that's where I was tonight. Jody Laubenberg, Jeff Leach, and Van Taylor. And I wish I could have stayed because they won't call on me. Because I ask the hard questions. Like, if you vote yes on a bill, does that mean you support it? Because Jeff Leach didn't vote no on any of those 9 propositions. I gave you a legal size sheet of paper that tells you only the names that you see on there over in the votes column. I've got the Senate and I've got the House. If there's not a name, that means that nobody voted no. If there is a name, they're the ones that voted no.
Which page is it on?
The legal size, the long one. You never got? I've got some. I'll give you one. And that's just on these 9 propositions. It's a 2-sided sheet. I also have given you the 3 constitutional questions for the different proposed amendments. You don't like my questions? Come up with your own and research it. All of the information that I gave you tonight on the 9 proposed amendments, they came from documentation that the legislature puts out down in Austin. I went and I looked through voting records. I have an article online that I wrote that has embedded links that will take you to the actual joint resolution and also to the enabling legislation where you can read all of the action, in the bill that's behind it. I would love to share this information with somebody. Just get in touch with me. I can give you my email address or get it to Regina or whatever. But look into it and show up. And if you don't understand something, vote no. Vote no. Because if they start seeing people vote no, they're going to think we're watching them. And, I'd like to teach everybody how to watch them. So, yes.
I would like to think there is a brain trust somewhere that is writing legislation for we, the people of Texas. And all I see down there in Austin is I see these toxic and explosive bills going in there, and then you have to end up going through all this effort dismantling the toxic situation so it doesn't affect us for years.
Right.
And what I guess I'm wondering about is who's in there fighting on our side to come up with good laws put
Good
before
bills?
these people.
Well, there are groups of people, and there is a drafting manual on their website. Clint Stutz, I don't know if you know
Yeah, I
Clint.
know him.
Okay, Clint Stutz sat down, he and, the guy that's running against Pitts down there in the same area.
TJ Fabby?
Yes,
TJ, right?
TJ Fabby.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's great.
They read the drafting manual. They wrote an anti-Obamacare bill. They got Charles Perry in the House to carry it. They couldn't get a Senate sponsor. They were trying Senator Birdwell. But it was great because it put all of the authority on the Secretary of State. Is that right? Yeah. So if I wanted to get out of paying a tax because I didn't carry health insurance, instead of the IRS coming and attaching my wages or, other activity, they would have to go through the Secretary of State. I would file for, I think they had it on there as $50 fee or a $30 fee. I would file a form with the Secretary of State. She was basically the gatekeeper. And so before the IRS could come into the state of Texas or in Collin County, they would have to go through the Secretary of State and file an action that they're coming after Barbara Harless, which she'd say, well, whoa, here she's already filed something, and another process would happen. But, we had a House rep.
Is there a form for that?
No, we wrote a bill, or citizens wrote a bill, and we got an author in the House of Representatives, but we couldn't find a sponsor over in the Senate because it has to pass both chambers, so it never came out of committee.
This comes out of the question where he said, how do we ever have good legislation proposed? But there is a way, there is a plan. We're
There is a
gonna
way.
have to Maybe take questions after we end the meeting. Maybe you'll talk to Albert in a minute. Is that okay? Is
That's
that
fine.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Because basically, I want to finish with a little bit more here.
Okay.
So this is Barbara Harless, and one more time, state maybe tell the people your email. What is your email?
My email is
Where you want them to reach you.
B as in boy, P as in Peter, Harless, Harless, at verizon.net. That's my personal email address. And one other thing, you can keep the handouts that you already have. This goes into more detail. This is an excellent brochure on the evils of a constitutional convention. This is a John Birch Society publication. I paid 50 cents for them, so if you want to reimburse me, please take one. Otherwise, I'm going to turn whatever I didn't sell tonight back into them and get my money back. So.
And then along these lines, remember it's November the 21st, where Kurt Hyde is going to have some DVDs. There's going to be a debate. I bet Barbara will be there.
I am going to be there.
There's going to be a lot of good people. It's another thing we have to get informed about because Mark Levin is the one that wrote the book, and it's gaining a lot of popularity among the Tea Party movement. And when stays behind something, it can be very scary. And they're of course going to promote it as something good about balanced budget or term limits or something that hasn't happened, but it's not a good idea. It's really not. The two things that she said very quickly are strong enough to say don't do it. We all know what she's trying to get at. We don't have honorable people to open this up. We do have an amendment process that if something needs to really be done, it can be done that way.
Well, they'll get in there and rewrite the whole thing.
Yeah,
And it'll be
that's right.
something that we
That's right.
don't want at all.
No.
Enforce the Constitution we have now, and
That's
then
right.
let's see what we want to amend.
That's right. Okay, so thank you very, very much.
Yes,
Very, very
thank
much.
you. Thank you for your time. Go vote, go vote.
And she'll still be around if you want to ask her some questions. I do want to remind everybody that there's some DVDs over here for $5, and look through them, because like someone was asking about the Joe Bannister or somebody, we've got a lot of, look at the names. Don't forget that we've got this over here, Voices of Freedom. Guys, this is a CD that has all those documents read on it, and it's only $5. And remember, Tuesday, please, everybody, on all the papers, we have my email, my phone number. Let me know who can be available on Monday to go do this Pete Sessions lunchtime thing where we can run into them and make some difference. Okay, please.